Let us transcend our preconceptions concerning enlightened sex. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. How do some enlightened people have sex? Don't they find it something unnecessary and meaningless? Enlightenment must have taken pleasure out of sex. It might feel like something that they are going through or enduring. How do some people still have sex? What's on their mind when they are having sex? Let us begin with some broad brushstrokes. This is an excellent question for many reasons, not the least of which is that it reveals harmful preconceptions. These preconceptions are not an indictment on the person asking the questions, but rather on an indictment of the society and authors and teachers that they have been subjected to. In my youth, it was inferred to me, if not outright said, that when someone is enlightened, they are liberated from the presence of certain emotions, no less the possession of any preferences. But I was mistaken. If we take enlightenment as simply the mastery of the Buddha's Eightfold Path, that the Eightfold Path was presented as a synopsis of the entire path of enlightenment, and that enlightenment is merely the mastery of this Eightfold Path, then that changes everything. But what is meant by mastery? As a small child, I was daunted by the task of learning how to tie my shoes. After much time and repeated instructions and tears, eventually I got so good at tying my shoes that I could do so spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. And that's what it looks like whenever we master any skill, whether it's riding a bicycle, or whether it's practicing mindfulness and meditation, or whether it's applying the fruits of mindfulness and meditation to the other facets of our life. The first enlightenment factor is mindfulness. So the path of enlightenment is not paved with the dampening of emotions, but rather with the brightening of emotions, with turning the volume of our emotions up, turning up the volume of our perceptions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. I sometimes joke with people that the benefit of meditation is that it increases your mindfulness, but the problem with meditation is that it increases your mindfulness. And so what makes a Buddha Buddha is not what they feel, but rather what they do with what they feel. And to a greater extent, not only what they do with what they feel, but how easily they're able to do that. How easily they're able to bring the teachings to bear on whatever they feel, be it glorious or grotesque, interesting or boring. Our preferences have more to say about our body than they do about our mind. We find that those who have studied human sexuality have found that members of the same genetic strain, the same family, will have the same preferences. This is not assuming that these are people who have had sex with family members or even people who have discussed sex with family members, but when confidential surveys are analyzed, it turns out that children, parents, grandparents tend to have similar sexual preferences or kinks, which strongly infers that this is more physiological than psychological. In a similar way, most people who suffer from psychopathy act as if they're playing from the same playbook. People who've never communicated with each other, which infers strongly that which drives psychopathy is physiological, not psychological. Now, clearly, I'm not equating sexual preference with psychopathy, but I am saying that the overlapping Venn diagram is that there is a physiological component. So an individual's preference for oral sex or aversion for oral sex, a preference for phallic sex, a preference for anal sex, a preference for digital sex, a preference for asexuality, and the frequency thereof. All these things have a huge physiological component. And so just as it is irrational to believe that when someone is enlightened, they no longer need oxygen or water or food or sleep, similarly, people's bodies are going to have the same set of needs and still express those needs. The question is, what sets the difference that makes the difference is not the presence of the preferences, but the manner in which those preferences are expressed. And one who is enlightened, they're expressed non-neurotically. One could still feel neurosis. One is no longer controlled by neurosis. One could still feel scared or uncomfortable voicing a preference to a new partner, or a hidden preference, or a recently unearthed preference to a long-term partner. But they will not be controlled by those fears. And that's the big difference. That's the very big difference. So it isn't that a Buddha only makes love in the Yabhyam asana, or position. No. It means that when those who are enlightened make love, well, I'll get back to that. Well, I guess we'll just jump right to that right now. When they make love, they do so from a flow, a joyful, loving flow, which brings something else to mind. In the contemporary practice of sexuality, especially tantric sexuality, many people are taught to dread ejaculation, and they are taught, or they're taught that they have to have a very intense type of orgasm, very specific type of orgasm, if they are to become enlightened. And so what happens is that the fundamental duality of Buddhism, the duality of hope and fear, of desire and dread, is just exacerbated. So the opposite of that is, instead of hating orgasm or loving or chasing, instead of fleeing ejaculation or chasing orgasm, lovemaking becomes a joyful, playful, loving, respectful flow, a dance where the only goal is to flow lovingly from centered spontaneity, not scattered spontaneity, like the kind you get after consuming your third espresso in 30 minutes, and not contrivance like someone following a cookbook, but centered spontaneity. And this will affect every area of one's life. When centered spontaneity affects one's chores, or one's fitness, or one's meditation, or one's teaching, or one's errands, or the way one handles finances, or the way one converses, or the way one makes love. Because we're not talking about scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. It is already marinated in consideration of others' emotional needs and physical needs and preferences thereof. Non-neurotically, but gently. Now, there is a very ugly myth that to accomplish this requires the length of time equal to the creation, sustenance, and dissolution of three universes. And that's just the ravings of those who know their shit doesn't work. After all, when we read the second to the final passage of the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha teaches that we can master his path in less than 7 years, or 7 quarters, or 7 months, or 7 fortnights, or 7 weeks, or even 7 days. It has been my experience that in this century, since most of us have not been conditioned over the span of our entire lives to sit cross-legged on a hard surface or to count on the creases of our fingers, we need to have a rational learning curve. And what I recommend is the following: starting off at training 5 minutes every 12 hours or so the first week. The second week, bumping that up to 10 minutes every 12 hours or so. The third week, bumping that up to 15 minutes every 12 hours or so, assuming that one's set a timer on their smartphone and one is attending the live streams that I teach on YouTube that are all free and that people can attend live or can attend at a later date if they live in an inconvenient time zone. YouTube's pretty good about saving my live streams. One can continue thusly every week, adding an additional 5 minutes to your practice, until by the conclusion of the 15th week, not only have you grown so comfortable at sitting for a 15-minute lesson in a 60-minute practice, but you've actually mastered the Eightfold Path. It's not difficult to do. After all, the Buddha said it's possible to do it in 7 days, to do it in 1 week. Therefore, 15 weeks, easy peasy lemon squeezy. No, don't make the mistake that I did of thinking that there can be no enlightenment if one has no tantric partner. Whether one has a partner or not, one can be enlightened. Whether one's partner is enthusiastic to join one's on the path or not, one can still be enlightened. In fact, I would say the only hope we have of surviving a incompatible relationship is by mastering the Buddha's path of mindfulness and meditation that strengthen our love and that create the love that is spontaneous and uncontrived and that fuels our ability to practice the effortless effort of surfing the here and now. I do look forward to chanting and meditating with you together as a team after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So together as a team, let us play with the latest iteration of Heart of Meditation. We're going to chant a bit of the Heart Sutra, and then rest in meditation, and go back and forth, just like that. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. Now, here's the deal. If at any point during this live stream, any point at all, you have a specific question, about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, simply type your question in great detail in the chat window. I'll be happy to answer it, but I gotta warn you, YouTube has a heck of a lag time between you typing and clicking send and me actually receiving it on my end. So if it seems like a short eternity, please do not take that personally. The Heart of Wisdom Sutta has been adapted and amplified from traditional sources by yours truly. Please chant with me. It is said that Quan Chi and Busan, an archetype of love and letting go, while moving in the deep peace of the perfect understanding of awareness and release, shed light on the five aggregates and found them equally empty. After this realization, she made peace with all pain. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Form does not differ from emptiness, emptiness does not differ from form. The same is true with feeling, appraisal, impulse, and awareness. So, what do we mean by emptiness? Emptiness only makes sense when we view it figuratively. Think of it this way. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel less graspable, could feel less tangible, could feel less permanent, could feel less defining. Now let's add some figures of speech into that. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever we noticed during our previous inhalation could feel as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Now, any good English teacher will remind us that a simile is only as effective as it is relatable. So, what is a real-world example of a non-graspable vast empty void? How about the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although is tantalizing to the eye, is intangible to the hand. There you have it. Mystery solved. So what are we going to do right now? As while we are breathing in and silently, mentally, and passively reciting the demonstrative pronoun this, the only label you will ever need, we can kick back and watch the antics of our mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we exhale, or while we exhale, as we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb ease, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Let's return to the opening lesson. No one sexual favor is more or less spiritual than the other. So, assuming that one is loving enough to communicate with one's partner and make sure they really enjoy, without coercement, enjoy giving certain sexual favors or receiving certain sexual favors, or playing certain sexual scenarios, or savoring certain sexual acts, as long as there's that loving communication, that loving respect, that no one sexual act is more spiritual than the other, whether it's something you like giving, something you like receiving, or something you like sharing. As long as it's from a place of love's centered spontaneity, cowabunga. Part of the mindfulness journey is rediscovering our preferences, what it is we really enjoy, what it is we really don't enjoy. Many of the times we are in the fever dream of puberty. We are so concerned about what our preferences say about us, or about repelling real or imagined partners, that we lose touch with what we really like and what we really dislike, forgetting that just as our bodies are always in a state of flux, so to a certain degree are our preferences. And it's okay on Monday to not want something, and on Tuesday to want something. And as many wonderful sexual educators have taught us, just as consent can come and go in a moment, regardless of the circumstance, so can preferences. And we are not defined by our preferences, but what we do with our preferences. And so that which makes us an enlightened sexual being is the mastery of love's centered spontaneity. And this also applies to our friends who feel that they are best described as being asexual or aromantic or any combination thereof. As long as where they are in the moment flows from love's centered spontaneity, then everything's a-okay. A sociopath or a narcissist might say, well, I'm just meeting their needs. They don't really know what they want. I know what they want. Therefore, I can ignore any desire or requirement for consent because I know what they really want. No, you don't. No, that's just a game monsters play. It's all about consent. Now, as one's relationship evolves over months and years and decades, one might have a shorthand for communication, which is splendid and beautiful and something to look forward to. But we must always have the vulnerability and the flexibility and the humility to savor and value and respect the consent or absence thereof of our partners, and give our partner permission to also be ever-changing and allow their preferences to be ever-changing. And let's explore something really scary. Just because you love someone is no guarantee you will always be compatible. There's no guarantee you will always be sexually compatible or romantically compatible. So if that happens, and your personal evolutions go on divergent paths, you might no longer be each other's lover. That doesn't mean you can't still be each other's friend. It doesn't mean we need to resent each other or hate each other or tell ugly stories to ourselves about each other, or tell ugly stories about ourselves to ourselves, if there is such a thing. This is delightfully portrayed in one of the Spider-Man movies, where two high school kids, started a passionate romantic relationship, and then ended it, and were totally mature and loving and platonic about the whole thing afterwards. People change and grow and evolve. And just as we live in an interdependent universe, on an interdependent, just as we live in an impermanent universe in an impermanent solar system on an impermanent planet with impermanent everything, weather systems, entities, land masses, geological formations, in a universe where everything is in flux, it makes perfect sense that regardless of how convenient or inconvenient or scary or pleasurable or painful it is, so are relationships. That doesn't make people disposable, but we have to give people permission to evolve, regardless of whether that evolution is scary or comfortable or convenient. There's this comic who's David Cross. He says something very insightful, which of course reminds me of Mel Brooks' Sister of the World Part 1, where a stand-up comic was considered a stand-up philosopher or a stand-up bullshitter. But either way, David Cross said something remarkably insightful. He said, consider your kinks. Consider that one kink you barely admit to yourself and you kind of judge yourself about. If you go to, this is many years ago when he said this, he said if you went to a pornographic bookstore and you found a magazine that specialized in this kink and you read the spine, you might see that this magazine has been in print for multiple decades. And if you did research, if you contacted someone whose job it is to be a sexual researcher, you might find that there's photographic of that evidence of that kink going back to the advent of photography, and that there is artistic representations of that kink going back centuries before that, and that we realize that, to paraphrase the book of Ecclesiastes, there is nothing new under the sun. There are no new kinks. And that those kinks are probably rooted more in our physiology than our psychology. Once again, as long as they're rooted in love's centered spontaneity, anything goes. And who we are is defined less by what we crave, but rather what we do with those cravings. But then I repeat myself. The third Chan patriarch composed a delightful treatise. In it he said, "Enlightenment is easy for those who have no preferences. Those who take that literally wind up sprinting headfirst into a brick wall, metaphorically speaking. His statements are best taken figuratively, so think of it this way. As we relax into our exhalation, whatever that which we feel drawn to during our inhalation could feel rather empty during our exhalation. Similarly, every time we relax into our exhalation, whatever that which we dread during our previous inhalation could also feel quite empty or more empty during our exhalation. So we explore the non-duality of dread and desire. Conventionally, as we breathe in, they are quite different. Ultimately, as we relax into our exhalation, they both feel quite non-graspable. Thus, conventionally different, ultimately similar. But since we take more than one in-breath and out-breath over the span of a lifetime, it's fair to say that we are constantly oscillating between the conventional and the ultimate, between the mindfulness and the meditation, between the perception and the release. And that's perfectly appropriate. If you've just joined me, welcome aboard. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, please type your question in great detail in the chat window. Please chant with me. Listen, Shari Pundra Phenomena are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither corrupted nor purified, neither increasing nor decreasing. So this is not to be taken literally, but figuratively. So the production we perceive as we relax into our exhalation, whatever production we notice during our inhalation could feel less graspable. Similarly, as we relax into our exhalation, whatever destruction we notice during our previous inhalation could also feel less graspable. Together. Therefore in emptiness there is no feeling, Therefore in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no appraisal, no impulse and no awareness that once perceived cannot be released. So I think this would be easier to chant if I do that edit. No sensation, no flavor, no sound, no sight, no phenomena that once perceived cannot be released. No body, no tongue, no nose, no ears, no eyes, no mind that once perceived cannot be released. No feeling, no tasting, no smelling, no hearing, no seeing, no noticing that once perceived cannot be released. So now let us return to the practice of spontaneously noticing and releasing. So by way of review, as we inhale and silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun this, the ultimate label, the universal label, we can kick back and watch the antics of our mind as it perceives, emotes, intends, reasons, recalls, and imagines. As we exhale, while silently, mentally, and passively reciting the one-syllable verb ease, we can relax into mind's non-graspable nature. Now let's have some fun with this. Let's explore something I like to call Bengali crease counting, because it was taught to me by a Bengali. let's explore how we can count 12 rounds of this exercise on just 4 fingers and 1 thumb. Pretending, of course, that a round consists of 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. During each inhalation, we could advance the tip of our left thumb, allowing it to come to rest upon various sets of creases on various fingers. Together, let's begin as we silently and mentally recite this ease with our left little finger. Left ring finger. Don't be put off if I'm counting faster than you. After all, I am doing all this talking. Then this talking makes me breathe faster. And now I move to the left middle finger. And then I move on to the left index finger. And just as I have counted 1 set of 12 repetitions on the left hand, I can count 12. Allow me to rephrase that. Just as I counted 12 rounds on my left hand, I can count 12 sets of 12 rounds on my right hand. So the first set of 12 rounds, the second set of 12 rounds, the third set of 12 rounds, and so forth. Is this mandatory? No. Do many people find it helpful? Yes. Give yourself permission to have a learning curve. The first time you do it, it can be awkward as hell. But if you play with this exercise for a few minutes every 12 hours or so, within a week or two, it'll feel like you've been doing it your whole life. In a good way. Some people meditate with their eyes tightly closed, with their eyes relaxed, with their eyes open, with their eyes wide open. Some meditate gazing at the earth, some meditate gazing at the sky, some meditate gazing at the horizon. Listen to your body. Due to my numerous physical limitations, I tend to meditate with my eyes closed so that I can slow down certain forms of neural degeneration. For anybody else out there who is familiar with ADHD, I would describe it as death by hyperfixation. And so I have to be very, very gentle with my body because I have the heart of a lion but the body of a lamb, and I must respect my limitations. Excuse me. Please chant with me. No interdependent origins and no extinction of them. From confusion to aging and death that once perceived cannot be released. No stress, no confusion, no liberation, no path. No understanding, no attainment that once perceived cannot be released. Because there is no attainment that once perceived cannot be released. The Bodhisattva archetypes of awareness and letting go supported. One moment. Let's make this underlined and let's make this bold because I'm trying to create a symbolic lexicon. So from the top, because there is no attainment that once perceived cannot be released, the Bodhisattva archetypes of awareness and release supported by the perfection of understanding find no obstacles for the minds that once perceived cannot be released. Okay, let's add this real quick. The pleasure of editing during class, eh? All right. Because there is no attainment that once perceived cannot be released, the Bodhisattva archetypes of awareness and release supported by perception and releases perfection of understanding. Find no obstacles for the minds that once perceived cannot be released. So I'm sure you see a pattern that is so obvious you can't miss it. Perception and release, perception and release, perception and release. Every time we inhale, perception. Every time we exhale, release. If we fight it, we shoot ourselves in the foot, metaphorically speaking. If we flow with it, enlightenment is quickly mastered and our life becomes an exciting adventure. Let's continue. Having no obstacles that once perceived cannot be released, they transcend the tyranny of fear. Liberating themselves forever from the tyranny of illusion and realizing perfect nirvana. All the Buddhas of the past, present, and future, thanks to this perfect understanding of noticing and releasing, arrive at full right and universal enlightenment. Oh, look at that. That's what we call an editing opportunity. Therefore one should know that this perfect understanding of noticing and releasing is like a great mantra, is like an unequal mantra, the destroyer of the tyranny of all suffering, the incorruptible truth. A mantra prajnaparamitas, perfect wisdom of awareness and release, could therefore be proclaimed. This is the mantra gate gate para sungate buddhi swan. Go completely and perfectly, go to enlightenment, may it be so. Please chant with me. In our compassion may we long to free all beings from the toxic tyranny of ever. Hating, craving, and clinging, metaphorically known as the three mental poisons. In our pragmatism may our liberation of all others be fueled by our reliance on the Buddha's example, instructions, and students, described by the metaphor of the three wish-fulfilling jewels. Having sat for the last 75 or so minutes, you might find it, what's the word I'm looking for? Refreshing to join me for 7 or so repetitions of Tibetan-style Buddha bowing. This is by no means mandatory. May we free all through the three jewels. 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 Whew. Let us rest the mind. Come, let us seal this morning's practice by chanting Love and Letting Go's wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all minds of all beings lucid yet void now be as enlightened as a Buddha's mind symbolized by a one-syllable bija. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void now be as loving as a Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void now be as healthy as a Yadamak type depicted in Buddha's statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void now be as fortunate as a pure land of law represented in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 9.25 hours, is that 9? No, that's 9.75 hours. I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.